So welcome back to Grinded, home of mindfulness, meditation, self-exploration. I haven't been on social media for a while, for about 4 or 5 weeks, due to just feeling withdrawn from it because I have been more internally focused. A lot more sort of stuff has come to the surface, but actually it's coming at you really fast waves. And so I want to talk about a few of the experiences that I've had now. It's been going on, well, I'm definitely out the other side of it now, but it went on for like solid 4 weeks, like literally one trauma after another. And it was a really good sort of experience for me because it really allowed me to see the nature of how deeply suppressed emotion is. So I'm going to give you one, I'm just going to talk about one of the examples of what's happened. Now, when you really become comfortable with feeling all of your emotions, when you really become comfortable with being in a negative space where you're having negative thoughts and you're having negative emotions and you're not trying to fight against it, and instead like there's an openness within you to allow it to arise, to allow it to be there. And what actually happens is the more you practice this, which is actually like a state of acceptance, to accept how you feel. And then, this takes time, this takes practice, because as human beings, we have been at war with ourselves. We've been at war with feeling suppressed emotional parts. And if you look at how that surfaces in your mind, it's like you're constantly trying to get away from how you feel. So as human beings, we don't want to feel down, we don't want to feel negative. We're always looking for a way of resolving it, which is basically looking at a way of getting rid of it. Well, in truth, the more we awaken, we begin to develop this ability to be able to feel. But before you can even begin to develop the ability to feel, you have to begin to develop the ability to accept, which is to no longer try to change how you feel and instead allow these feelings to arise. You see, first we have to get out of the way of trying to change how you feel. You have to see that what you're trying to do is, what we say is, I don't want to feel like this. Well, when you become comfortable with accepting that you don't want to feel like this, then you move in beyond the resistance to feeling, and then you start to actually feel. And the way we start to actually feel is just by being open, by just allowing. And I'm going to give you just a little bit of what's happened recently with me, just because I can really show it by really feeling it and really going into the emotion. I can really demonstrate what the emotion looks like. And so, out of one of the sort of four deep rooted traumas that have come up recently, I'm going to talk about one because it drove me mental for years, for absolute years. I've been stuck in this coping, what we class as a coping mechanism is how you deal with a suppressed emotion. You try to resolve it through either conditioning yourself to be a certain way, to act in a certain way, or in example for what I'm going to give, it's the how you're trying to overcome an emotional trauma that you have. So, and this one literally plagued my life for years, for absolute years. And even so, when I come into my own awakening, this pattern of behavior was still plaguing me all the way up until about 4 weeks ago, when I actually released the trauma behind it. So this way of being, which I was always constantly trying to work myself out, trying to figure myself out, trying to work out what's wrong with me, trying to work out, trying to change how I feel, basically. But when I look at the pattern, I was always trying to figure something out about myself, trying to figure out why I was unhappy, trying to figure out what was wrong with me. And then so, I've been stuck in this pattern for my whole life. I've been fully aware of this pattern operating in me. So anyway, it's, as the time's gone by through my awakening, I've had to come to accept this pattern, come to accept the fact that I'm always trying to work myself out, trying to come to accept the fact that I'm always trying to escape how I feel. And so the more I've accepted that pattern into my life and the more I've seen it operating in my mind, the more at peace I've become with it. So I can have this arising in my mind of trying to work myself out, but I'm not fighting it or resisting it. I'm just clearly seeing it. So, 3 weeks ago, I have this heavy, heavy emotion sitting on me, and I can feel it, and I can feel it, and I'm just allowing it, and I'm allowing it, and I'm allowing it. And then Lauren comes over, and like I just give her a hug. And then as I give her a hug, like I say, like, I don't know what's wrong with me. And then it's like, boom. All of a sudden, like, that trauma, like, it comes up to the surface, and all of these emotions start hitting me. And it's like, I don't know what's wrong with me. And then as I open up, as this emotion opens up with, I don't know what's wrong with me, I come into the second layer of the emotion. And and underneath, I don't know what's wrong with me, is everybody hurts me. And then, so as I'm experiencing this emotion, I'm actually re-experiencing this emotion as a childlike aspect of myself. I can feel this childlike aspect. I can feel the emotion of it, and it's like I'm actually stepping into that aspect of myself of when I was a child. And so it started off with, I don't know what's wrong with me. And then it come into everybody hurts me. And so in my childhood, I would have been experiencing, because a belief is actually a truth. It's actually a personal truth. It doesn't mean it's a whole truth. It means it's a personal truth. If you have a belief, it is a personal truth you have. And so I had this personal truth that everybody hurts me. And then as I went deeper into that, beneath that was the realization, beneath that hurtful part, there was the part that says, I love everybody. Now that was the actual truth of my being. When I come into this existence, and as all children do, we all come into this experience as, I love everybody. Because you come into this state, you're in a natural state of love, and the only thing that begins to divide that natural state of love up is when you experience trauma that you cannot resolve, or that has no resolve. And so when a trauma doesn't have a resolve, you develop a coping mechanism, a way in which you cope with the trauma. So this was an actual thing that was happening for me in my childhood, was that I was experiencing people being horrible to me. Now that's a childlike perspective. From an adult perspective, I can see that everybody is experiencing emotional trauma, and so as adults we project that trauma that we're experiencing onto our children. But then that creates this feelings of children actually thinking people hurt them. And so, and this is because I couldn't handle this belief, because I was in my child, and it was obviously come from parents and close loved ones that were actually hurting me, because there wasn't no resolve, the trauma wasn't being resolved between what was being inflicted on me. I then developed a way in which I could cope. So the way in which I could cope, on top of that belief, come the coping mechanism, something's wrong with me. You see, now I live in the coping mechanism. If I can work myself out, if I can work out why people are being horrible to me, then I'm no longer going to have to face this painful truth that people are horrible to me. So as children, this is how we work. We don't have these greater perspectives as adults. And in our adult life, we look back and we go, well, yeah, my childhood was good. My mum and dad were good to me. But that's not the actual truth of your childhood experience, because you was birthed in as pure love. And any emotional projection is going to create a painful emotional trauma within you. And so in our childhood, we're developing all of these ways in which we can cope with trauma. And in our adult lives, we're still living in the coping mechanisms. We're still staying in the coping mechanisms. And the coping mechanism is actually associated with the trauma. So when we're thinking negatively, we're in the coping mechanisms, which are trying to overcome or trying to escape the actual trauma. And so we have to develop this capacity to be able to feel our emotions, to actually allow ourselves to feel and accept whatever is arising to arise. And then after a while, as you bring more acceptance and more love into yourself, these emotional layers can come up. And I literally passed through 4 deep suppressed emotional layers in the space of 4 weeks. I've never gone through such a deep healing process, but these really are like the core layers. And if we look at that, I actually had a personal truth that everybody hurts me, and that there is something wrong with me. And so because I actually held that personal belief, I never trusted anybody. You see, another way in which we cope with that is we stop trusting people. And so my whole life I've never trusted anybody, never trusted a single person. Why? Because I have a belief, a core belief that people hurt me. You see, and this is why it's so important to understand how you feel. Because how you truly feel on a core level is dictating your life. It's dictating your experiences. So you continuously experience people that actually hurt you. My first 3 years of my relationship with my children's mum was actually very deeply toxic. And I've had a lot of toxic relationships. For some reason, as I was growing up, and now I know why, I used to get into a lot of trouble. I used to get a lot of problems with people. But now I understand why. I now understand why I never express myself, why I never allowed myself to express myself. You see, if there's something wrong with me, if I believe there's something wrong with me, I'm not going to put myself out there. I'm not going to express who I am. And this is why, like, the healing journey is so important, because there is so much we are not aware of. And we're not aware of it because we're at war with how we feel. And until that war changes with how we feel, we can never get to our core truths, because we're fighting against the core truths. And the core truths are painful to us. And that's why I do this work of self-transformation, because I've been to my core, I've seen my core, I know how this whole human dysfunction works. It's the only reason we don't know pure love. It's the only reason we don't know source. It's the only reason we don't know God. Because we all have this internal war going on within us. And the way in which we're dealing with it is we're coping. But life is never about coping. So if you take anything away from this video, it's just see the fundamental thing that you do in your life is to cope, to try to control. And the only reason we try to control our reality is because we're trying to control how we feel. To the next one, much love.